Stephen next reviews habits 1, 2, and 3 and outlines specific personal benefits that are attainable as one cultivates the first 3 habits.
My friends, let us review now the first 3 habits so that we feel a good and deep understanding about these habits. First is the habit of personal vision we call be proactive. Second is the habit of personal leadership we call begin with the end in mind. Third is the habit of personal management we call put first things first. I suggest there are 4 unique human endowments that animals do not possess necessary to fulfill those 3 habits. Habit 1 requires self-awareness. The awareness that you are not a script, that you can think about your scripts, about your programs, and begin the process of self-programming. Habit 2 requires the unique human endowments of imagination and conscience, where you can detect and invent meaning in any given set of circumstance. You can write your own mission statement, your own roles and goals. Habit 3, the habit of personal management, is the second creation. It is the physical creation. It is the execution and requires the human endowment of willpower. Exercise independent will when you don't want to do it, because you're not a function of what you want to do, you're a function of your values. That is the very nucleus of character. To do what you know you should do when you don't want to do it, because you know eventually what it will produce, and above all, you're maintaining your integrity. Now, I want to show what happens when people cultivate those 3 habits. It produces an internal source of personal security. It produces a sense that I am in charge of my own life, a sense of self-reliance, of independence. And you don't get your sense of worth from being compared with other people. You see, most people have derived their sense of value and worth from such comparisons. In the academic world, the normal distribution curve. In the social world, if you belong because you conform to certain norms and expectations. In the athletic world, you're number 1. Or you're not, you're number 2. Most of people's experiences have given them a sense their worth is based on other people's opinions. It comes from an external or an extrinsic source. If love is given unconditionally in the first few years of children's lives, it gives them an inner sense of security that will last them the rest of their life. If it is given very conditionally, they begin to define themselves in relation to other people with whom they've been compared. Now, if they want to exercise their proactive capacities and write new scripts, it's as if they're giving themselves a new childhood. Otherwise, those scripts will direct them, guide them, and haunt them for the rest of their life. The child is father to the man, psychic determinism teaches. It is a lie, but for people who believe it, it's true. When you move onto a totally different path, a different road, as Robert Frost wrote in his poem, The Road Less Traveled, 2 paths diverged in the woods, I took the path less traveled. That made all of the difference. I'm talking about a totally different path. It's habits 1, 2, and 3. It's building your security on your integrity to your value system. That's what it is. That's character. Now what happens? Do you want to see the immediate fruit? You don't compare yourself with others. It produces what I call the abundance mentality. But if people have been deeply scripted into comparison for their sense of personal worth, they develop a scarcity mentality. There's only so much, only so many people can be A students. Only one person can be number 1. Then they immediately begin to compare themselves with other people. Those individuals have a hard time being happy for the successes of others, particularly if those others are right around them, even members of their own family. They may experience a marvelous success, and they might say to those, oh, I'm so happy for you, that's wonderful, but inwardly they're eating their heart out. Secretly, they even harbor hopes that people can experience misfortunes. Those are the fruits of a scarcity mentality. Can you see why it would be so hard to practice the relationship habits of 4, 5, and 6 with a scarcity mentality? Habit 4 itself, think win-win, means you're always looking for mutual benefit, for things that benefit all the people involved, including yourself. You're not into zero-sum thinking. You're not into competition. You can think cooperatively. You can think team. You can think we. And when push comes to shove, you think we the most, not the least. You don't immediately revert to that scripting unless habits 1, 2, or 3 are not deeply grounded inside the character. Then, out of a scarcity mentality, you might learn the personality techniques of win-win. But when push comes to shove, when the storms descend, what you really are will surface, and you'll be inwardly torn, ambiguous, and duplicitous. And that eats at people, drains their energies, it produces psychosomatic illnesses. There are so many fruits of being inwardly conflicted. Trying to become all things to all people, you end up becoming nothing to everybody, including yourself. In one of those books I read in the Literature Review, Erich Fromm writes a paragraph at the end of The Sane Society, which capsulizes what happens when people get their sense of worth from other people. He put it this way: today we come across an individual who behaves like an automaton, who doesn't know or understand himself, and the only person that he knows is the person that he is supposed to be, whose meaningless chatter has replaced communicative speech, whose sense of dull despair has taken the place of genuine pain, and whose synthetic smiles replace genuine laughter. Two statements may be said concerning this individual. One is that he suffers from the defects of spontaneity and individuality which may seem to be incurable. At the same time, it may be said of him, he does not differ essentially from the millions of the rest of us who walk upon this earth. In other words, he's become alienated from himself and victimized, driven by the agendas, the schedules, the scripting, the programming of other people, other generations, or whatever. In fact, Martin Buber, in his brilliant book, I and Thou, traces the secularization of the culture similarly. I and Thou stands for I and Thou, God and His children. Thou, see, reverence. The next stage is I for myself, Thou for you, human beings, it for God. The next stage, I for myself and it for you, where you become a manipulatable asset or resource to serve my purposes. And the last stage is it and it, the total alienation of self. And when the culture gets mature and ripened in an alienation from the value of human life and the respect for the dignity of the individuals that are there, including employees and customers as well as loved ones, children, parents, and so forth, then a whole different paradigm pervades the culture that tends to become very alienating and dehumanizing, mechanistic, producing great misery and unhappiness. And then all there's left are pleasures, short-term gratifications. And the higher purposes that a person has thought about their own life are not being served.